Hi, you guys. This is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio, and I apologize we're coming to you by telephone today instead of video, but it's going to be well worth it because we have a great guest who's been on multiple times before on our show, and that's Tom DeWeese from American Policy Center. And I've been following and supporting their work for many years. They are one of the best sources of information about not only what's wrong with Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 connected issues, but specifically what can be done to help reverse the direction that those things are going in. As Rosa Coria said, the inventory and control of every living and non-living item on the planet, which is really not that great of an idea, leading in a direction of destruction for all of us. And Tom has been devoting his work and his life to education on these issues for a long time. Not just education, but helping people change things in their own communities locally, which is really valuable. So we got a chance to talk to him about some important issues today under Agenda 21, including property rights, education, free enterprise, and things like that. So it's going to go by in a flash, but we'll try to put in as much of the important stuff as we can. And welcome, Tom, and thanks for giving us the time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's exciting. So, I always like to make these shows educational and appealing to the people who do not know what we're talking about. Otherwise, we kind of fall into emphasizing speaking to the people who enjoy it, but they already know all this stuff or most of it. And I like to include brand newcomers. So there's two things I want to put in. We don't have to take a lot of time, but just as context, one is for somebody who doesn't know what an Agenda 21 might be, and the other one who doesn't know about your work. So first of all, if I know nothing about it, what's Agenda 21 and why does it matter and what's its current form?
Well, Agenda 21 was a culmination of a whole bunch of UN meetings and UN plans throughout the 1970s and 1980s. And finally, in 1992, they all kind of came together at the Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, and they first of all, they were calling it the Agenda for the 21st Century. And what's that agenda? Well, they said very openly and very proudly that Agenda 21 is a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. And they laid down a whole agenda of what the future would be, controlling how we live, where we live, what our jobs would be, our transportation, our energy use, everything, all under the threat of environmental Armageddon. If we don't do this, then the Earth is going to not be livable, and so we have to do this. It's an emergency. And that was the attitude there. 50,000 delegates, almost all the world's heads of state, including George H.W. Bush, signed on to this, and a whole bunch of these non-governmental organizations, which really helped write the thing. They're private organizations with private agendas, but they were able to get their private agendas into this, and we're now seeing the results of that in almost every community in the country. Where you're seeing what the programs called sustainable development and smart growth, and these are changing. Attacks on private property is now considered racist, and
right.
On and on. So this is it controls on our energy use. You're seeing California where they're talking about banning any other kind of energy except wind and solar.
Right.
This is the precursor for what's going to happen across the country if they are allowed to do all this. And of course, if you've been following at all the Green New Deal, then you get a real feel for where this is headed and where it's been headed all along.
So this is, when you started explaining it, I was going to ask, well, why would they want to put all this energy and time and money and everything into reorganizing human society? And you kind of answered that as far as what they say the reason is, which is a good reason. It's to save the world. And that if we don't reorganize human society, then the things that have been talked about I guess by Al Gore and by all these groups that are now culminating in the Green New Deal, is that humans are a threat to the survival of life on Earth, right? And this is the answer.
Yeah, that is exactly right. That is what they're saying, and that is why there's such a panic over it. If we try to question these policies and try to say, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense, whatever. Immediately, instead of getting into a real, honest scientific discussion where you have scientists saying, well, my findings are this, and that's what true science is they're always finding different things, and well, let's explain this, and if they can do a peer review of it, and if they can have other people come up with the same findings, and it does fall into place, well, okay, it's going that way. But what we have here is a political agenda where they claim that there is no discussion. The consensus is, 97% of scientists say this. Well, that is just blatantly false. And there's a lot of people saying, whoa, wait a minute, this is not true. And we're not allowed to discuss that. And these people who are what they call the skeptics are being shut out of grant programs, being shut out of scientific publications, things like that. Yeah. That's not scientific discussion. That's tyranny. When it comes
it sounds like a religion, because if you dare to question it, that's blasphemy.
Exactly, right? and a lot of people have compared it to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So a few minutes ago, it was 1992, and these guys were meeting down there, including George H.W. Bush, at a time when many fewer Americans were questioning the total integrity of the leaders. And now suddenly it's 20 years into the 21st century, and this is all about what to do in the 21st century. So it's happening and accelerating now, and I guess it's just grace that we haven't destroyed the world already, and that we have this one last chance to amend all of our mistakes. And where in that process did you get interested, and how did you start your group, and what's the parallel evolution of that compared to what you just described?
Yeah. Well, I actually kind of got involved in the late 1980s. I was working a lot of what I was doing then was working on either personal privacy issues or education issues. Mm-hmm. We were fighting a lot of the education policies that have now made up the Department of Education and stuff. But as we were going through that, I was just looking at some of I was like everybody else, hearing about ozone holes and, that sort of thing. And I was concerned. I live on a planet. I want to make sure the planet's safe. Yeah. And so I was starting to listen to some of these things and look at it. But then I started to see some of these policies and what they were putting in place. And what I began to see was this top-down dictatorship. And the first question that came to mind was, what about our private property rights? And that's when the war began. And I started questioning these policies and going into them. Took the Sierra Club and some others straight on. Had my head handed to me several times as I did that. And but that was where we began. Well, then when Agenda 21 came along, I had a mentor. His name was Henry Lamb, and Henry went to these international meetings. He broadcast from there what was going on and so forth, and after it was done, he pulled several of us who were working in property rights issues. There was a movement at the time called the Wise Use Movement, and back then, the very first people who were beginning to feel the effects of these environmental policies were people in the rural areas, the ranchers, the farmers, the timber industry, the mining industry, and the Wise Use Movement was made up of those kinds of people who were the first victims of it. And I got involved in that, and from that, Henry taught a bunch of us what he had learned at the Earth Summit and others on what this Agenda 21 was. It was one of those kind of meetings, Richard, where every hour it went by, it was like, oh no, not that. We got to the point of saying, I can't take any more. Here's one more thing you have to know about.
Yeah.
But when it was over, we understood, and there were 4 or 5 of us that really took it on, and we created the Freedom 21 movement. In counter to it, we put on 10 national conferences, and what we were doing then was we were training people, and we were showing, building a cadre of people who, to this day, are still the core of people fighting these issues.
Wow. And you said, well, first of all, a question about Henry Lamb. Didn't he do some writing that was on News with Views?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It seems like I've read a bunch of his stuff. It was great. And the other thing is, and it's probably still there for anybody that wants to see it, newswithviews.com is a good site. Lots of good writers there. And you said that some of the early victims of the loss of property rights were the farmers and ranchers, and I want to get into that in a minute, and people in the rural areas. But I think people are gradually, there's a big, I'm stuttering because I have about 5 things I want to be saying at once. There's besides all the physical attacks on humanity right now that really are happening, real environmental issues, most of which are intentional and man-made, but not the way that people think. The bigger assault, I think, is the psychological one. And one of the things that I noticed we're being taught is that property rights that's a movement of the rich people to take away everybody's property. So what's the real perspective on property rights? Why is that important? And why is it something that helps everybody and not just the rich people who have property?
Well, we go back in history, and in most cases and back in history in countries, you had kings or potentates or whatever you want to call the dictator of the day, and they owned everything. And the people were basically pawns in the whole thing. They had absolutely no means to build any kind of personal wealth. They just had to do what they were told, and building a life of their own was literally impossible. And this was the history that our founders understood. They had come from that. They had just escaped that tyranny. They'd overthrown it. And if you don't believe that, you can study at the very same time of our revolution. Take a look at what was happening to the Irish in the United Kingdom, because they were nothing but slaves, and they had no means to own property and so forth. Our founding fathers understood that, and they listened to, or they were very well educated in people that John Locke was a major economist at the time, who advocated that property rights, that is the means for the average person to begin to build their own life of their own, to own the fruits of their own labor, farmers and so forth. And this private property was the number one way for building prosperity in an economy, and as they put that together, that is why the United States soared so rapidly and became such an economic power, because of private property rights. And 60% of the businesses in this country were started by people using equity from their private property. Once you own the property, and in this country, we're unique because every bit of property is registered. That means that you can use the property, the value of it, the equity in it, for loans and things like that. And that's how these businesses got started, using that. They didn't have to go to a king and say, please, may I? They had it. And the majority of people in the country were employed by these kinds of companies. Right. And so, this is how we built the economy. So
small businesses and farms all over the country, I guess.
Yeah. And the other part of that is take a look at what's happened in recent history. Going back 100 years, we've had this huge emphasis on eradicating poverty. All over the world, we're going to eradicate poverty. We have government poverty programs. We have private poverty programs. We have had billions and billions of dollars put into these programs. And yet, what do we have? More poverty, because they don't work. The main tool to use to eradicate poverty is ownership of private property. And I'll tell you a quick story. Back in 2006, I was invited to Cambridge University in England to debate the issue of the United Nations. And one of the people that I was debating was a gentleman named Shetty. He was the head of the Salih Shetty. He was the head of the UN Millennium Project. The UN Millennium Project came about in 2000, and it was kind of an arm added to Agenda 21, more detail. They keep doing that every 5 to 10 years. They come out with a new plan. It's the same plan. It's just a little more detail. They had 8 goals in that, and most of the goals were focused on eradication of poverty, and the means to do that was redistribution of wealth. In other words, we'll take from your pocket, we'll put it in these guys' pocket. Tomorrow, these guys need some more, we'll take some more. And so at this debate, I was sitting next to Mr. Shetty at a dinner before the debate, and about towards the end of the dinner, I turned to Mr. Shetty and I said, "You realize you don't have a prayer, don't you?" And he looked at me and he said, "About what?" And I said, "Eradicating poverty by 2015 by using redistribution of wealth." He said, "Yeah, I know." Well, then we had to go debate. Well, first of all, I started talking about private property ownership and so forth. And he looked at me and he said, "Hernando de Soto." I said, "Yes, Hernando de Soto is an economist from Peru who wrote a book called The Mysteries of Capital, Why Capitalism Triumphs in the West and Fails Everywhere Else." And the premise that he teaches is that so many countries don't allow private property ownership, and the reason, as I just said, that the United States is so unique is because we register all of our property. I said this to him, and he looked at me and he said, "I have colleagues who are looking upon this favorably." And at that moment, we had to go debate. As soon as that debate was over, I beelined it over to Mr. Shetty, and I said, "You and I started a discussion. I want to finish it." I ended up meeting him in his office at the UN in New York City. He was from India. He told me in that meeting that in his community in India, they had started to register private property, and the economy was beginning to rise. There it is.
Wow, beautiful. So in the beginning, in the previous system, they had kings and queens, and they were like the mothers and fathers of all the peasants, right? And everybody else was children, just waiting to be taken care of.
Yes.
So the motivation to do anything was completely different.
Yeah, I mean, what choice did you have? You're a pawn. And the king had the armies, the king owned all the property. No one else owned property but the king. It was his. And,
right.
So if he decided he wanted to go to war with somebody for whatever reason, well, you're going to go to war.
And the king was always doing that for the benefit of the people, to take care of them, right, for their own
always for the
welfare, right? Which sounds very much like some current systems that are being promoted. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you about another thing too. You were saying that the people in the rural areas, when you were first learning about the private property issues, were the ones that were being hurt. How were they being hurt by what was going on with private property rights?
Well, it's going on today. The ranchers, particularly ranchers and farmers in the West. The West was, as those states were added to the Union, were set up differently than those that are east of the Mississippi. They in the east part of the country, you have deeds to your land. You have an absolute document that shows you own that land. In the West, this vast expanse and so forth, you had the railroads that wanted right-of-ways, and they didn't want to have to pay a property owner for the right-of-way. It was expensive. It was expensive in the East. They wanted to, make it easier in the West. And so these different rules were put down And ranchers were, instead of given a deed for their property, they were given certificates, basically. They were given water rights and grazing rights. Mm-hmm. It's been proven in court over the years that those water rights and grazing rights are absolutely as valuable and as private property as if they had a deed to the ranch. But what they did, the federal government declared all of that land out there federal lands, and you end up with states like Nevada, which has, 60-70% is all federal lands. And so these ranchers are trying to live on that and earn a living, and for many decades they were able to do that. The government understood the situation, and they were treated as private property. Well, then along comes the environmental movement that wants the lands. A major part of the environmental movement was created by Dave Foreman of Earth First, who I think is the most demented mind ever to enter that movement. And he created what was called the Wildlands Project. And he said, this is what he said. He said, "Our vision is simple. We live for the day when grizzlies in Chihuahua, Mexico, have an unbroken connection to grizzlies in Alaska, where gray wolves populations are continuous from New Mexico to Greenland." This gives you an idea of the ideas of behind the Wildlands Project. Private property was not to be there. Human beings were in the way, and the only thing that he also said, my three main goals would be to reduce human populations to about 100 million worldwide, destroy the industrial infrastructure, and see wilderness with its full complement of species returning throughout the world. This is what he said. And so the Wildlands Project was being implemented, and you see the wolf populations being repopulated, and grizzly bears and so forth. Well, what has happened from that is that the cattle and other livestock have been attacked by these things. The wolves and the grizzlies have no predators themselves, and so they are just growing by leaps and bounds. And this is kind of the stuff. Then they started putting rules on water use and that sort of thing. And then they started to take people like rancher Wayne Hage and confiscate cattle that they say got onto public rangelands and so forth. All these things are done to put these guys out of business, and that is happening right and left in the West.
Right, and you're saying that east of the Mississippi, they didn't declare the land federal land?
No, I mean there is federal land there, but as the Constitution says, federal land basically is where you put government buildings, and if you need to build roads, then we will. There is this thing called eminent domain that we could use for very specific purposes, but it was very, very limited.
Right, it would be a tiny amount of the national real estate, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you do have to have certain things, but in the West it was completely different. And by this time, as these Western states were being brought in, there was a new mindset of a lot of people who were involved in government, and so you began to see this difference put in place.
Well, now, what is the excuse they use to make it not blatantly illegal for the federal government to own most of the West?
Well, today the excuse is it's for the environment. And, we're seeing the attacks on the cattle industry. You've just seen the whole big attack on cattle through the Green New Deal, but that's been going on. These environmentalists, which are also teamed up with the animal rights movement, that eating beef is dangerous to the planet, and that they're using the cattle are using for their grazing huge amounts of land that could be used to grow wheat and soy and feed a lot more people. Right. Never mind what your personal choice might be of what you want to eat.
Okay, but before we totally get into that, my question was, how do they get around the thing that it's blatantly unconstitutional for the federal government to own land other than the specified uses and amounts that are in the Constitution?
Well, again, it was set up that way, the way the states were set up at the time. And it was an understanding. But what's happening now is that the organizations like the Bureau of Land Management and the Department of Interior and so forth, Wayne Hage, I use him as an example because he was one of the first who fought back, and to this day, and he's passed away, but to this day, his family continues to try to fight to save the ranch, and they have won in court over and over and over again, and the government just files an appeal. And
is he in Oregon?
No, he was in Nevada.
Nevada, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you see the Hammonds in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another example. It is a standard practice by folks that live out in the wilderness like that and have their rangelands and stuff to make sure that brush and trees and stuff don't grow up out of control because these forest fires that burn. Mm-hmm. And it'll burn much hotter, and it's your house is in danger and everything else. So they do a controlled burn of the land and keep that brush down, and it keeps the soil better. And so I don't know all the details of it. I'm not a farmer, but this is what I've been told. And then they what happened was the Hammonds were doing a controlled burn, and a little bit of it got a little bit out of control, and a few acres of federal land was burned. Well, the federal land should have been burned anyway. The government should have been doing it. But they took them to court over that. The Hammonds served 5 years in jail for doing that. They got out of jail, and the government said that wasn't long enough. They needed longer, and they put them back in jail. Talk about double jeopardy.
Yeah,
and exactly. This is the kind of out-of-control policies that are, and government that's terrorizing these property owners out there.
Is it still true, though, that underneath all the excuses, it's unconstitutionally illegal for the federal government to own most of these states in the West?
If the states would rise up and take their control back, yes. And the states, instead of doing that, have cooperated and let it go. Utah and a couple other Utah, I think, was a main state that was beginning to fight back and say, we're going to take back our land. And if these states would do that, they have the power to do that, but they're not.
Well, yeah, one of the reasons I bring it up is because we're talking about individuals. If they can get private property, they can start businesses and be much more well off. And one of the reasons that buying property, besides the whole economic issue with the Federal Reserve removing the value of the money, which is a big deal, but as far as scarcity of property available for farms and ranches by individual owners, one of the key reasons for that's the case, that scarcity is there, is because so much of the land is unavailable. It's owned by the federal government. And if that were reversed, which it should be, then people would have a lot more private property they could buy at reasonable prices, it seems to me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And once you make something scarce, then, of course, the cost skyrockets. I mean, that's just a matter of economics.
Yeah.
And so that happens. But once you do have that private property, if you do own your property, there are all these rules and regulations on your water use and fencing and as I said about the grazing lands and that sort of thing. Wetlands is another one. The Endangered Species Act is another weapon that they use. And I mean, there's a case out in Nevada, I've been told, where it rains like once a year, and when that happens, then there's this one little lowland area where it becomes one great big mud puddle for a couple of weeks till it evaporates, and then it's back to dirt again. And the federal government deemed that a wetlands.
Right.
And that's another control. Yeah.
Yeah. And you could probably assign an endangered species to about any piece of land you wanted to.
Sure. And one of the sad things about this is the real loyal environmentalists, the people who really do love the land, and that just appeals to them. Yeah. And one of the things they love to do is get out into the land, into the wilderness, and the idea of being able to go through the forest and so forth is their dream.
Right.
And so they think, well, we got to preserve this for that purpose. Well, then we find out with the not only the Endangered Species Act, but the Invasive Species Act. Now they are banning human beings from going into these wilderness areas because, you might bring spores of invasive species on your shoe.
Right.
And so this is the excuse to keep you out of there. So,
wow. Now, you mentioned also that in the east of the Mississippi, in that part of the country, people had more real ownership of the land. Is that related to what's called a allodial title, or do you know what that is?
Yeah, it is. And when the United States, when we were able to overthrow England, of course, all the land here was owned by the king, and so the new government issued to all of the private property owners that they, from the federal government, that they owned their land. They they gave them titles, so they knew exactly what was theirs. And you can go back into some. As time went on, the government began to kind of hide this as they were beginning to change and take these things. And so that's. You can do the research into that and find those titles to your land, and it has worked. Several people have fought these situations and have claimed their land because of that. Yeah,
there are some sites on the internet that actually advertise that they can do that for you. I don't know how many are legitimate and how many are fraudulent, but the idea's out there.
Yeah, it's out there. Land patents is what I was trying to say. And
okay.
So
when the first colonists came over from Europe and England, and they set up homesteads and things like that, did the king own their land, or what was going on at that time?
At the beginning, yeah, because the early explorers, that came here and claimed the land for England. Well, if you claim the land for England, you're claiming it for the king.
Right.
And so that's so it started out that way, and
so people had property and fences and stuff like that, but it was just they were basically stewards of the king's land.
Like everything else, they served at his pleasure.
Okay.
And this was one of the reasons for the revolution, that kind of tyranny from the king. They were tired of it. And it wasn't just the land. There were lots of other reasons, of course, the taxes and all that. But basically, it was this arbitrary dictatorship that you're going to do it our way.
So if there was any dissent, the king could do anything to you that he wanted to stop it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now in the beginning, we got into talking about Agenda 21 and the meeting that was in Rio de Janeiro in 92. But how has it morphed into a new form between then and now, and what's it currently?
Yeah. When we started fighting Agenda 21 and started having some success, people started going to city council and complaining and protesting and stuff. What's going on? It's funny because the people who were promoting this in the beginning, as I said, were very proud to say this is a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society, and we're going to save the planet. We're going to do
Sounds pretty good.
Then we started putting a spotlight on it. All of a sudden, they went, "The what?" Oh, you mean that innocuous 20-year-old document that has no enforcement capability? That is just a voluntary thing. It was just a suggestion. And they continue to use that today. And they use it against me all the time, that I'm putting out conspiracy theories about just a good suggestion. I'm just against good ideas.
You don't even want to save the world. I don't know what's wrong with you.
No, I know. I mean, where am I going to live when the planet's destroyed?
Exactly.
How dare I?
Right.
Yeah. The way that it became what it is now, this behemoth, is that in 1993, Bill Clinton became president. Mm-hmm. Bill Clinton put out an executive order, and he created the President's Council on Sustainable Development. The purpose of the President's Council was to make the suggestions of Agenda 21 policy. And on that council were representatives of pretty much every single federal agency, and particularly HUD and Department of Interior and EPA and Department of Transportation and these guys. Also on that council were representatives of a lot of the same NGO, non-governmental organizations that helped write Agenda 21 in the first place. The Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, the other ones, and National Resources Defense Council, groups like this. And what they did was they were the ones that wrote grant proposals, grant programs for all those different agencies. And in those grants, they put specific language that any community taking the grant had to adhere to this, to comply, to be in compliance.
Wow.
Well, that was the language of Agenda 21 and sustainable development. Then those same NGO groups went into state legislatures and they lobbied to get the state legislatures to pass regulations that counties or communities had to do a comprehensive development plan. Now you've got city councilmen, county commissioners sitting there going, what the heck is a comprehensive development plan? The same NGO groups arrived there, and they said, don't worry about it. Got it all right here in a box for you, and we got the money for you, too. So you don't have to worry about it. That's the way it became the rule of law from the so-called voluntary suggestion of Agenda 21. Yeah.
Basically bribery, it sounds like, because they were offering it, and they called it grants to be respectable.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that we're now, as I go through across the country speaking on this, and I talk about how do you stop this. Number one is stop taking the grants. And
right, and the representatives want to show that they're getting money for the community by their wonderful actions.
Yeah, and the argument is, well, this is our money. This, and if we don't take it, somebody else will. So we need to get this money. Yeah, that's the argument.
And they're right in a way, because the federal government confiscated it initially through taxes.
Yeah. And if a community does stand up to it, a city council would stand up and say, nope, we're not going to take that grant. These same NGOs will start this big campaign against them saying, your elected officials are cheating you out of your money.
Got it. Okay, and they've got unlimited money for that campaign.
They've got billions. Absolutely, yeah.
Wow, that's an interesting situation. So, what you just described, the transition from voluntary to mandatory, I bet, not one person in 1,000 really understands. Because if they can completely grasp that calls into question all kinds of programs.
Oh, it does, absolutely.
The government's into giving grants to other countries, to people all over the place, to groups and clubs and NGOs and things, and I think almost nobody ever really thinks about what that is.
And what they don't think about also are all the people who are involved in this, all the different kinds of groups. There are probably thousands of these NGO groups. Every single program you hear about, for example, bike trails and controls on energy use and that kind of. Every single one of those kinds of programs have their own NGO. That's what they totally focus on. They know exactly what the program is to be. They have it all written out exactly, and they know exactly what grants to go after to make that happen.
Why don't you explain to people what NGOs are? Because I think it's easy to forget. Almost nobody knows really what that term means.
Yeah. It's non-governmental organizations, and a lot of people think, well, it's just private groups. We got lots of. I have a group, American Policy Center, and they go, well, that's an NGO. No, it's not. In the United Nations documents, and what am I trying to say? It's major document that it operates under, and it's a simple term, and my brain just went dead. It's but in its documents, it specifically talks about non-governmental organizations, and the UN.
Is that the UN Charter that you're?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure.
I told you it was a simple word.
Once in a while, I think this.
Just too much stuff there.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
We're trying to cover about 10-year stuff within a couple of hours.
Right. Yeah.
It's challenging.
But they officially sanction groups to be NGOs. And so an NGO is actually an officially sanctioned group by the UN. Once they've done that, then they're allowed to operate in those back rooms and help write these programs and be involved in these things.
So that would be interesting to know what are the criteria to get accepted as a UN certified NGO.
Yeah, you have to fill out a document to do an application and so forth. And I don't know exactly what they look at to say you are one, because there are some organizations like the National Rifle Association that have become official NGOs, so they can operate inside there, and they argue that gives them the ability to counter some things, there, and so
you'd have to be incredibly careful against getting subtly corrupted, though, if you join that group.
And watch some of the policies that come out of things like the NRA, and people are going, "Why'd they do that?" Well, you might want to look there and see.
Yeah, it could be something about the fine print in a 1,000-page contract they just signed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you will find. I've got a list here in front of me of a bunch of these organizations: the International Chamber of Commerce, the World Federation of Trade Unions, the International Council of Environmental Laws, Greenpeace, AARP, and I actually will find the YMCA and the YWCA in here. You will find Planned Parenthood, the National Education Association, Green Cross International, which is founded and run by Mikhail Gorbachev, the last dictator of the Soviet Union, is one of them. So, International Council on Management of Population Programs. So,
and that's just a group of people who chose that name and got certified.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Chamber of Commerce, everybody thinks that's wonderful. What do you know about that?
Well, the Chamber of Commerce has become one of the organizations helping bring these programs in place. They're helping to get those grants and talking about new development for the community and all that. I've run into the Chamber of Commerce constantly in opposition to what I say. And it used to be that they were the pro-business organization. If anybody was promoting free enterprise, it would be the Chamber of Commerce.
I think that impression is still out there for most people.
Sure it is. And this is where we get the tinfoil hats. When we start telling people this, well, the Chamber of Commerce, the YMCA, the YWCA become...
You're against everything wholesome, basically.
Exactly, yeah, because these were established... part of the establishment of our whole culture, our whole society. Yeah. And that's who we look to. It's what we did.
And they were really good originally, right?
Yeah, they were. They were started on good things. It was back in the early '80s that I learned that the YWCA had become a temple for the women's rights, or the feminist movement. Yeah, and the really radical side of that. So that's
interesting. Wow. Yeah. So when you're talking and talking about good things about property rights and all that, what does the International Chamber of Commerce say to show that you're crazy?
Well, they'll talk about first of all, they are big people to take the grant programs, and they are not defending private property. They're saying that, well, we need to do these things. This will help the prosperity of the community. That's always the big key to it. Somehow, magically, all kinds of business is now going to come here if we put these things in place. It hasn't been the case actually, but that is the argument they always use. They always talk about healthy communities, but they're not there trying to promote or protect single-family homes. They are not trying to keep down the rules and regulations that are killing small private mom-and-pop businesses. It has become almost impossible now to start a new small personally owned business because these corporations the Walmarts of the world, and others that are playing the game with this. They got their arm around the local city council. They are in partnership. They get tax breaks. They get the choice land where to put their stores. Here in Warrenton, Virginia, where I am, you wouldn't believe the gyrations that Walmart went through, to put a new store in here. Of course, they all hide it behind the trees so they can keep the view shed. It's that kind of thing.
That's an interesting word. Right.
Yeah, well, that's one of their words, but that's that's how it operates. Now, the breakdown at the UN is the main organization there is the United Nations Environmental Program, the UNEP. Under that are what we call the Big Three: the World Wildlife, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the World Resources Institute, and the International Union of Conservation and Nature. These are the three main organizations in the world that are driving these programs. Underneath them, we have what we call the ground troops. Those are the non-governmental organizations, thousands of them, as we said. But sitting on the same panel with them is the U.S., the EPA, the Forest Service, the National Park Service, and then you also have groups like the American Planning Association. American Planning Association is in every single community practically in this country. If it's not them, there's an associated planning group that is there. And these are the guys who get their hands on those grants and begin to put the plan together. And so there's the circle right there.
Okay, so when you talk about the American Planning Association, and they would be offering the grants to the towns to just simply make all the voluntary things mandatory, does the group American Planning Association get grants themselves so that they have their money covered too, or how does that work?
Yeah, they live off the grants. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, they all work. They'll work, together with the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, and others that are bringing these things in.
Okay,
yeah,
so
they all work together.
The American Planning Association, a nonprofit charitable organization, basically.
I wouldn't call it a charitable organization, and they are an association of planners, and they. They're the ones that come in. You have these facilitated meetings teaching people about what planning is and do you support planning and all that sort of thing. Yeah. And they're the ones running all that kind of stuff.
So they're educating people that if you don't do what they say, that means you want to destroy the world.
Yeah, well, they certainly do that, but they deny it. I have fun with them in a way because they are actually cowards. The minute we put up any kind of opposition to them, they go into a panic. And when we started building real opposition to their agenda, they immediately put together a boot camp to retrain their planners on how to talk about planning. And one of the things that came out of that it was called the Glossary for the Public. This is the opening line of this document for the American Planning Association. Given the heightened scrutiny of planners by some members of the public, what is said or not said is especially important in building support for planning. And then they go down through here, frame your message. And it's just a discussion. It's imperative that planners frame discussions about sustainability, regionalism, livability, and the like. It says in a way that emphasizes the economic value, long-lasting benefits, and positive outcomes that result from good planning and plan implementation. And those words, regionalism, livability, and sustainability, they have in parentheses. These are trigger words. It says, and it goes on, and it says, critics see red. The following are examples of words and phrases that have become highly politicized and generate suspicion among some citizens. And those very words, regionalism, public visioning, things like that. So don't use those words. And I have joked that eventually, if we keep in this war with them, and every time they come out with a new word, we then trigger that, they're going to have to start giving their presentations in sign language because they won't have any words left.
So they won't trigger the conspiracy theorists, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, wow. That tells you the honesty of what we're dealing with here.
So the thing is that these people who are parts of cogs in this machine to take away the property rights and bring everything back to the king and queen situation that we started with, they are willing to do anything for money, including sell out everybody else. And they're not in it because they actually understand any of that stuff. They're just going off a checklist and using words they're trained to use and all that stuff. So it seems like maybe one of their weak points is that if they were countered by groups like you're talking about, that you're trying to create, that actually understood what's happening, there would be no contest because they don't have that. So this brings up the whole question of appropriate education as a countermeasure.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what we focus on. That's what we do. The problem is that these guys have massive amounts of money and massive amounts of political power. But we are starting to see some things, shake a little bit, shake, rattle, and roll. I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but one of the big organizations that have been attacking people like me and putting those tinfoil hats on and putting out this false information and everything is the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen the most recent reports.
I did.
They just fired Morris Dees, and this whole report came out. A guy from the inside talked about how they were all cynical. They were raising money in the name of poverty and all that, and that it was just a joke that they.
They didn't believe in anything that they talked about, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. So this gives you an idea of what we're up against here. They know, and why did they, yesterday have this vote on the Green New Deal, and it was 57-0 with all the Democrats voting present, and the reason is because this was too stark. It's like, idiot, don't tell them what we're really doing. We got to get rid of this thing.
Yeah.
And that's really what was going on there. And, they don't want that language out there to scare people to death.
Right. So I didn't see what happened yesterday in that vote. What's the result of it, and what does it mean?
Well, it was a Senate vote, and Mitch McConnell brought it up on purpose. And it was really funny because, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's the sponsor of the bill, was highly upset. Now, she's in the House, was finally highly upset because Mitch McConnell was going to bring her bill for a vote. Who does that? And because they knew that this was part of the game. And, he knew he had the votes to kill it. And so they didn't want it to bring it for a vote. They put it out there to begin to get the discussion going and bring out the little pieces and parts of it. And what's going to happen now is exactly that. They're already putting out pieces and parts of it. We have a lot of it already in place, or being put in place. But it make it so it's a smaller pill to swallow instead of the whole big thing.
Yeah.
And
So Justice Democrats is going to have to come up with a more acceptable approach, I guess, to merge with the main Democrat Party.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that got Ocasio-Cortez on a casting call to act like the part of a congressperson.
Exactly, yeah. And she's not, I don't think she's going to get an Oscar for this performance.
What a disappointment. It was her first major role.
Yeah, I know.
Good job.
Well, interestingly enough, in the United States, we, propaganda is much more sophisticated here than it's probably been in other places. We have this massive news media, and we have the ability to tell these stories in a way that don't sound so threatening. But other countries, that's not necessarily true. And we found a report on a website of an NGO in France, where they have, of course, the Green New Deal is not just in the United States. It's a this is all global. There is no difference in the Green New Deal and Agenda 21. It is that. Yeah. And this NGO in France put together like 3 pages of bullet points on what they really mean here. They're much more honest, much more open, and I'll just share a couple of them with you here.
Sure.
One of them is mandatory fixed working hours in order to simplify the implementation of public transportation and carpooling. In other words, we're putting these smart growth communities together where you'll not have cars anymore, and now you've created your own problem because you got all these people trying to get to work. How do we do that? And so we have these fixed working. Everybody works at the same time. Well, there goes, third shift and things like that. A 5% reduction in the number of miles driven by personal use per year, and then that'll increase as time goes by. 50% more trains to be put into service by 2030. Let's see. There's a couple of them here that are just outstanding. New single-family home construction, except trailers, prohibited. New buildings must be exclusively condos with a maximum per capita living area of 320 square feet.
Yeah.
Now, for our millennial friends here who, want to use their computers constantly and so forth. One of the things it calls for here is video stream must be reduced by a factor of 3 by 2030. For ladies who like to shop, limit to 2 pounds of new clothing on the market per year and per person from 2022. This is the kind of control, bans on all junk foods, hamburgers, pizzas, pastas, chicken nuggets, on and on and on like this. This is the kind of control these guys are talking about. Yet here they kind of hide it a little bit, but this is much more honest. This will happen here too. When you and the attacks, we already have the attacks on private property and single-family homes. We have the attacks on what we eat, the cattle industry. I can go into detail on. On and on and on. We already are having these things, but they just put it in words that doesn't sound quite so threatening.
So, since this is more effective on a population that's highly brainwashed in what they think about everything, how does the current educational system fit into this whole thing? I mean, do you have some insight in that?
Oh, yeah. Well, the current education system is academics are not part of the curriculum. A kid may bring home an algebra book or a history book or something like that, look inside and see what's there. What you see is behavior modification, how to think, what to think, it's all a political agenda, and it is not about academics. This is what's going on in the schools. We are the Common Core math programs and so forth. These are all put together to create the perfect global citizen to live in this Green New Deal world. And just look what's happening. We're starting to see real activism coming out of the classroom. The teachers telling the kids, we're going to take the day off today, and we're all going to go down and protest such and such. Right. And I read an article the other day of a kid who sat there and said, no, I'm not going to go. I don't want to do that. And the teacher comes down on the kid and reports them to, uncooperative, bad attitude. It's okay to wear a Che Guevara T-shirt, but don't try to wear a MAGA hat. And,
right. Or American flag shirts or anything that could be hurtful to people. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is nothing but pure political propaganda and control. And I believe I mentioned to you once before about an organization out of the UN, a UN NGO called the Eden Institute. And I unfortunately was contacted by them one day about some article that I written they didn't like. But I looked into who they were, and they advocate a policy called globally acceptable truth. Think about those words, globally acceptable truth. And they say the reason we have wars and poverty and strife is because there's too much knowledge. And that makes it difficult for people to make decisions in their life. So we are going to make life better for them by instituting globally acceptable truth, and they won't have to worry about all those decisions anymore.
Well, Eden Institute, is that what that's called?
Eden Institute, and globally acceptable truth literally is the curriculum of the American education system.
Well, so what are some examples of globally acceptable truths?
Well, global warming, for one.
Okay.
Or climate change is absolutely that. Private property is racist, is another. They do not have any knowledge of the American economic system. Free enterprise is racist. They just put all that aside. They are teaching pure communism in the classroom. And, you're not supposed to say that word. That's radical. But I challenge anybody to prove me wrong.
The Eden Institute is not personally walking into the classrooms, right? Are they getting that implemented by somehow putting educational policies in place that lead in that direction?
Oh, absolutely. The Federal Department of Education is the perpetrator of this. And, that came under Jimmy Carter, the National Education Association, the NEA, is the real perpetrators of that. And as I mentioned earlier, they are one of the NGOs that are sitting there, a UN NGO group that are sitting on that UNEP panel and so forth. So it started clear back in at the very in the beginning, back in the 80s and early 90s. There was a library down in downtown D.C. Run by the National Education Association, and they had in their records old tests and so forth that were given to kids clear back in history. Wow. And we went down one day to try to get some of those tests. They had been removed. So all this history in the past has been taken away.
Wow. Yeah, I don't want you to lose that train of thought, but it just reminds me I recently got a couple of copies of a great book from one of our guests, and I went to the library after I had read it and wanted to give one of them to him. And they said, well, we're upgrading and improving our library collection, and all the new books coming in have to be within the last 5 years.
Upgrading and improving. How do you improve on all the works of Shakespeare and Plato?
Yeah, those were just revving up to the quality works that are being done now, especially by government.
Well, the other thing that has taken place, I wrote my book Erase, fiction novel in this world we're talking about, just a few years into the future. Right. And when I wrote it, I didn't really know. My focus on it was on the e-books that now are prevalent in everything. And I had read an article that said that the Kindle books and so forth, they could tell when you're reading and what you're reading. If you're somehow they can tell if you're enjoying it. Maybe it's how much time you spend on it, the fact you finish the book. But the idea was they could use this in marketing. So they knew if you like this book, we can make more like that. I get that. But I woke up one morning after I read this and I thought, what happens if this gets in the wrong hands, this kind of technology? And the book Erase was born. The idea that books can be changed. We don't need book burnings anymore. That's too messy. We just press a button and we change it. Or we don't make them available, which is what you just said.
Well, this is happening on Amazon in the last month. They are banning books and especially ebooks, but even they're starting to ban hard copies on unacceptable topics. But with the ebooks, they can go in after you buy it and erase it.
Yeah, they can change it, make it say something different. And the reason I was saying all this is because a couple of years ago, I went to my high school reunion, and they had done a bunch of stuff at the high school. We were getting a tour of the high school, my class, and we were standing out in the hall, and the lady giving us the tour was standing there with all the lockers, that line the hallway.
Yeah.
And she said, if I could get into all these lockers, you would find that most of them are empty. And we said, well, why is that? She said, we don't use books anymore.
Wow.
Everything is on your cell phone or your iPad or whatever the case may be.
All of which, of course, have to be wireless.
Yeah. And then she talked about how a teacher could give a test in the class, and they take out their cell phones or their iPads and they or their computers, whatever it be, and answer the questions that way. And nothing was on paper, no books whatsoever. And now they're able, and I even had this in my book, the scene where they were able to change the to control the whole curriculum by
change what a book says, change history, change science, change all that stuff.
And we're already seeing where the textbooks are being changed overnight to include, as a new policy comes up, it's already there. They've already got histories of Trump in the history books now, and in the
telling how he came in to destroy the world and stuff.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah, they've already got that in some of the textbooks because they're able to do it instantly. If they were still having to print the textbooks, then it would take years to bring them together.
It would just be impractical, right?
Mm-hmm. But that's what they're doing. Yeah.
Wow. So the teachers, there are all these old myths, like people used to use pencils and paper and stuff like that. And one of them is that teachers used to actually teach things based on their own wisdom and life experience, and that's why they were hired, because they had something to offer. Now they're being made into uniform facilitators, right, that they just convey. Like news anchors don't have any idea what the news is. They just read it off the teleprompters, including the tone of voice and the facial expression they're supposed to have. And there have been compilations made across like 50 different channels, and all the very serious news anchors are using the exact same words, as if they just thought of them. And the teachers are doing something similar. So really, this kind of stuff is not actually even coming from the teachers in school. It's coming from who writes their material. Teachers,
and it's important to me that the teachers understand I'm not condemning them. There are good teachers, but they have to do what they have to do.
Right.
And a lot of them have left the system. The really good teachers can't stand it, and they've left.
I know.
And a lot of the teachers that are in the classroom now are the same victims. They have come up through the same education system, and right up through the teacher schools and stuff, and this is all they know. They don't even know.
And if you want to graduate as a teacher, it's easier to tell yourself you believe it than to resist.
Yeah, you resist, you're not going to, and you're not going to get a job and stuff. So, but I think back to the like, for example, the English teachers that I had.
Yeah.
These people, these were ladies who, in most cases, not always ladies, but the ones I had were adamant that you knew exact proper language and you used it.
Yeah.
And
I remember.
You did not want to disappoint those ladies.
No, they were tough. They were tough. I had some of them too. One in particular in 7th grade was responsible for me learning how to speak, at least to some degree. That's a real valuable thing, and people don't have the same understanding of anything now. It's like learning and understanding has been replaced by memorization to a large extent.
Yeah, but again, it's what's being memorized. One of the big things under the Clinton Goals 2000 program, there was a big deal made about we're going to get computers in every classroom. New technology. Oh, golly, golly, golly. Well, what they sold it as is if your child was a little slower learner, well, we can put a special program together on there that will help them learn at their pace, and that'll bring them up. And if your child is a really fast learner, we can put a program on that will help them. They won't get bored in the classroom. And another big part of it was children helping children. That here you are, you're one of the smarter kids in class. You get burdened by becoming in the 8th grade. You become a teacher, for somebody else, which they're not emotionally equipped for. And that was one of the things we're putting together. But using these computers, this is what we were told that was going to be used for. In reality, the computer is being used to continually bring up this behavior modification with the specific answers not to academic questions, but to behavioral questions, and constantly testing them. When they began to answer those questions properly, having the proper attitudes, values, and beliefs that they wanted them to have, the education system is working.
Right.
That's the system.
And how early, how young of an age does that start at, and how?
They are starting every year. We get another line of preschool, and what we got 3-year-olds now starting to go into these programs and stuff. They want that child from the very beginning, and and children are in school longer than normal. We used to have all summer free. Now they're back in August, and the longer they have them, they do not want them in the hands of the parents. And so the family's breaking down. We used to have family vacations where there's no time for that anymore, on and on and on. And I know people say, oh, no, come on. That's it. Look at it. Take a look at these systems. I have in my possession a high school health book, and in that health book is an 800 number that a child is encouraged to call if their parents are disciplining them, that they can turn their parents in. The phone number is in the health book.
Wow.
So,
and I wonder how many parents know that their kids are getting this kind of stuff.
Yeah, they see them come home with an algebra book or an English book, and they think it's just relating back to their own experience.
Yeah,
and they don't question it. And those that do, of course, are put into
special programs.
A place where exactly. They're not allowed to come in the classroom. And so that was the other thing. We had my mother and other mothers would come every once in a while. They had a little party, and they'd bring baked goods and stuff in, and we have cupcakes and that kind of thing. Right. And the mothers would come into the classroom and stuff. Not allowed to anymore, and they're not allowed to bring baked goods from home to share because they could be poisoned of some kind, or have something in them that children can't have, or something. All this kind of control. They don't want the parents anywhere near these children or the classroom where they're learning this stuff.
Right. And it is definitely behavior control, and they didn't used to teach that as a subject, but I know there are reports all over the country now of kids spending significant time learning that they're probably not the gender they think they are. Things like that are becoming major subjects.
Imagine the psychotic people that are going to come out of these classrooms and put them 10 years in the future, whenever. And here they have been told, you don't know whether you're a man or a woman. You don't know what you are. You have just imagine what we're going to be dealing with people who have no ability to make any decisions about their lives and are totally confused. I mean, talk about child abuse. Exactly. They'll need the state, and they'll need drugs to feel okay, because if the drugs wear off and they start realizing all these conflicts, they won't feel very good. Yeah. Well, they need a safe place, and they need Play-Doh, and that already is the case. I mean, that's not just for little kids. That's for college kids, too. College kids, yeah. When you have a college kid that totally freaks out, tears running down their face, screaming, because somebody had written on the sidewalk, "Trump for president." I saw that. I mean, that was so traumatic. Yeah. This is a serious situation. Schools, especially colleges, were the place where you could have great debates, where both sides were looked at, and stand your ground. What do you believe in? Debate it. I remember that. That's actually really fun to do. Yeah, and you goes clear back to the Greeks. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I mean, I was in the university in the 60s, and the teachers used to sit out at night with us. They didn't care if it was late or whatever. And everybody would just, on an equal footing from what they had to share, would talk about how do we, improve the future fate of the world. And it was great. Yeah. But that's no longer No longer allowed. I mean, anybody. I used to go in. I actually did a whole day of presentations in Chicago junior high school, and the teachers were all coming. Can you come to my class? Can you come to my class?
Yeah.
And I'm not even allowed in the schools today. So. You know.
So how did they manage that? Each individual school tells you can't come over to visit.
It's very subtle. It's just, there'll be a protest. And you see what happens at the colleges or something, but they'll just rise up. And the kids, of course, some teachers probably egged them on. You know who this guy is? We can't have that in our school. And,
right. This is a racist, xenophobe, misogynist, totalitarian Nazi. And if you guys don't want him to come, then this is what you have to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's happening. The classroom has become the center of political protest, political action. And, back in the late 60s, the Weathermen, who were, the underground terrorists of the time, broke off from the SDS. Right. And they put together a thing they called Days of Rage. And the purpose of that was to storm classrooms and get kids to walk out or start protests in the classroom, sit-ins, things like that. You know what? The curriculum now in the classroom is the Weatherman's Days of Rage.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah. And I know even in the university level, because I've been involved in some more programs lately, the whole thing is that you can't say anything that would be potentially hurtful to anybody. So that's why I guess you really need wonderful organizations like the Eden Institute, because if you have a globally acceptable truth, then part of that is it won't make anybody feel bad.
Yeah.
And you get acceptable speech.
Authority.
Right.
Everybody.
And I know in the UK and England now, they're banning all kinds of speech on the internet. You can be arrested for questioning, saying, or posting a quote that's not an acceptable truth. And they have a new category that you can be fined or imprisoned for. And that's saying anything, even if it's true, they classify it as a hate fact. Yeah. So you can't say hate facts anymore.
I know, and I was just talking to somebody last night. You get these. They're always talking about peace. We want peace.
Absolutely.
Well, what they mean by that, what a lot of people don't understand is, after we kill all of our opposition, then we'll have peace.
It's incredibly peaceful. In fact, totally quiet. Yeah, and that's been used by governments and religions and armies and everything for a long time. Yeah. And it's like language is one of the major weapons used against everybody now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this whole thing of getting rid of sexist pronouns and so forth, he, she, that kind of thing. I mean, can you imagine if you and I go off to a cave somewhere and then come back 20 years from now, we won't even be able to communicate with people.
You'd be in jail right away for the words you'd use. Yeah, I completely agree. The other thing is that since they do want custody of the children from when they're 2 or 3 years old or sooner, if the parents are distracted trying to work enough to be able to survive, that helps a lot. And I think to really understand how all this fits together, the piece of it, which is the devaluation of the money in circulation, is absolutely essential. If that's understood, then you know why things like $1,000 an hour minimum wage is not going to make everybody rich. The central banks, which are controlling virtually every major country on the planet now, are a major part of the whole program. And I think a lot of people say, well, I can't understand economics, or that's another topic, or this. One of the things in education that's really making people dumb down is the idea of specialization, that you only have to study certain narrow areas of knowledge, and so you need committees organized under these various groups to tell you what the bottom line of everything is. All you can understand is your specialty. And that's completely not true. If you don't have a wide spectrum of understanding, all of these individual areas are not going to be fully understood at all.
Yeah. Well, this goes right back. I was talking about the Bill Clinton education programs, and one of them was the Workforce Development Boards, originally called the Careers Act. And the way this was sold was that corporations would put the curriculum together to begin to put training programs together to create the kind of workers they needed. This is the Workforce Development Boards. And I had a Republican congressman say, well, isn't that the Republican way to bring in free enterprise into the curriculum? That's how he saw it. And what they're really doing is creating the mindless worker that doesn't know anything else. And as they began to test them, as they began to do different things, they put their curriculums together, they would say, well, if you're going to be this kind of worker or this kind, maybe you're going to be a hairdresser, whatever, you don't need history, you don't need economics and so forth. You need to understand this or this. And so people, and this became the, those workforce development boards and, controlling the curriculum that way. Specifically.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Keep people only thinking about what they need to think about.
Yeah. And how in the world can anybody, look at how the world was for clear back from Roman times or before, clear up until Thomas Jefferson's time, even beyond. These people all moved in the same world. They had the same horsepower. They had the same candlelight. No matter what, all those years. Right. Along comes the late 1890s, early 1900s, and we had a couple of guys. We had Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and the Wright brothers who completely changed the world. Completely. Mm-hmm. We flew, we drove, we lit.
Yeah.
And
true.
This upset the apple cart. Now, how in the world can corporate representatives in the education system, in these workforce development boards, how can they tell what kind of worker they're going to need in the future if a Henry Ford or a Thomas Edison or a Wright brothers pops up and changes everything with a whole thing we never even thought was possible? As you said earlier, a well-rounded academic education prepares you to be anything. All you need to do then is be trained a little bit in whatever specific job that you're going to do. But you already have the background. You have everything else. Taking somebody and saying, you're going to be this, it may not exist by the time you get to that.
And even if it did exist, it's not their right to tell us what we're going to be anyway.
Exactly.
If education just shows you how to think and how to become conscious, that would be valuable. Yeah. And I think Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, that specialization thing is part of the weaponized psychological program being used to really enslave everybody invisibly.
Yeah. What we're really doing is we're laying the groundwork down where nobody thinks, and that would guarantee that there will not be somebody upsetting our well-organized society like a Henry Ford or a Thomas Edison or whatever, and so that won't happen.
Yeah, that's
right. Believe it or not, at the when they in 2015 when they had the big meeting to create the Agenda 2030, which was just another step in putting all this together, they talked about zero economic growth. This is the way to have a well-ordered society, no surprises or anything. Yes. Nobody gets wealthy. Nobody moves forward. It stays right here. Zero economic growth. Grown people, supposedly educated, were sitting at tables and at podiums preaching zero economic growth. This is what we're dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. People have been taught that that's how you save the environment.
Yeah. Well, again, the humans are not part of the environment. We are a cancer on the environment.
Exactly.
And so So take out all human activity, and that's what you get: zero economic growth, and
world peace.
And world peace, yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I think subtly, not just in classrooms, but through entertainment, programmed entertainment, there are paradigms and archetypes being put in place that, a lot of people have talked about, one of which is that fighting is the way everything is done. And you have to choose what labels you want to wear and then fight with everybody else, which neutralizes any positive effect of the general population because they're worried, busy fighting all the time instead of innovation in a good direction. And I think one of those ways that shows up is that all the major issues are partisan. And the whole point of the issue is decide what side you're on and show that the other side is crazy. Mm-hmm. It's like a debate is not to find out what's true, it's to show that the other person's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't you find it interesting that almost every program created for the younger generations, the movies, things like that, the computer games, all that, everything is based on the creation of superstars. All the DC comic things and all that stuff.
And the superstar is the best killer in general.
Yeah. And they are all living in this world where, if anything you don't like, well, there's going to be a superstar that's going to come and take it away from you. There's it's Superman, Batman, whatever the case may be. Yeah. Everything is based on that, and I've just been watching this and noticing that good old love stories and stories of human interaction, normal people and stuff, hardly exist anymore. Every movie is a fantasy.
Yeah.
And that's
the general population stands around helpless while the superhero takes care of it. Mm-hmm. And I know that's how Batman was saving Gotham City and stuff like that. The regular people were just standing there shivering in fear, and Batman had to come save everybody.
Yeah, yeah. I think that has. I think that's really by design, and that's. I never go to those. They don't interest me in the least.
Well, they're taking them farther now, and especially with the new war against men, I think, mm-hmm. and actually against women too, because their roles are being taken away. But the men are being shown more and more on sitcoms and general television as being real idiots. I mean, mm-hmm. and teaching the public that not only is humanity the cancer, but men are really the most totally evil of everything.
And the bottom line to all this is that when you have a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society, what do you do to create that reorganize it? And all the attitudes, values, and beliefs that used to be there are gone. And that goes right down to, as we're saying, our entertainment, our education system, and it's going to affect even what we eat, and all those different issues. That's why you and I are talking about all these things, because that is how you change the whole society.
Yeah, I think where it's going, you can see also that the perfect society is made up of robots, not humans.
Yeah. Yeah. I even saw somebody make a comment the other day that, what was it? It had to do with the fact that robots are taking all of our jobs, mm-hmm. and so we had to come up with some other economic system for everybody, like probably the $1,000.
Well, the universal basic income is part of the Green New Deal and all that stuff. And people in support of that, I've talked to organic groups that I have supported for decades, and with large numbers of people in them, and saying, you guys, a real Green New Deal would be great. It would, taking care of the life support system of the planet is obviously necessary, but there's these little details that you didn't look at because the word organic is in there. And one of them is this, for example, this universal basic income thing. You become, the property of whoever gives you that universal basic income. And just like the towns that take grants, and there's going to be conditions on it. And if you dissent or do anything unacceptable, that's fine. They just cancel your universal basic income until you come to your senses.
Yeah, it's basically Pavlov's dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is another reason why one of the issues I've worked on over the years is personal privacy and the total surveillance society.
Right.
Getting all of your records into a computer, everything, and there are people who have access to those records and can add to them and change them, and you could be driving down the street and have a taillight out, and a cop, who's got a computer in his car, comes up to you, and he finds in the computer that, there's a warrant out for your arrest, or you have done this or done that, maybe completely bogus.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's somebody else's, the stealing of Social Security numbers and creating new, lives on them and so forth. And so who knows how convoluted, how messed up those records are, and how do you prove who you are? And they can shut off your bank accounts. They can, shut off your entire life with a flip of a switch. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Most of the customer service representatives that you talk to in big corporations are all robots now. They're not humans. And they don't have a lot of empathy for where you're coming from. It's an interesting experience. Yeah, and I was just going to say the healthcare system is being used that way too. I mean, if you have these wonderful medical records that are universally accessible, if you've decided, for example, on the records to do natural health care of some kind for your child who is in an environment that gave them brain cancer or something, or they got it from the cell phone or whatever, and you decide you don't want them to be killed by chemotherapy, CPS can come and kidnap your children legally.
Yeah, this is happening more and more. That's proving more and more that your child is not yours. Your child is a ward of the state, and the mandatory vaccines and all of that sort of thing. Women are arguing for abortion because my body, my choice. But somehow
incredible?
That come over to a vaccine.
Well, and they're arguing now the abortion thing's really coming out of the covers, because before they were saying, well, it's part of my body, it's not a person or anything because it's not breathing air yet, which now is being completely disproven by 4G sonograms and things like that. They show this several-inch long baby trying to fight off the murder weapon that they're aborting him with. But now they're not even, using that argument. They're saying any age after birth, they can also be aborted. And they've passed a law in New York that sets no maximum age. And that's not a human being if you choose abortion.
So can we now use for our excuse, if we are accused of, murdering somebody, I'm talking somebody who's, 20, 30, 40 years old, we say, no, I just aborted them?
No, you can only do that if you're their parent.
I see. Okay.
So that's what keeps it safe, because the parent has the right to do that, and it's still part of their body.
Yeah.
I mean,
my parents used to spank me, but man, this really takes it farther on.
Yeah, this is a little more severe. And
pardon me for laughing, but this is insanity.
It is. It's programmed insanity, and I don't think it's the fault of any of the victims of it, really, because it's a sophisticated program and it's very effective. So the mothers that think if they kill their child, it's just like cutting your toenails. It's part of your body. They're not evil. It's not their fault. This is exactly what they were supposed to think. So it has to be countered by, if there's still a way to do it, some real education. And I think that gets into probably the focus of what you're trying to do with your group right now, right?
Well, I want to make sure I say, because as we get into these discussions, and they are, everything we're talking about is actually happening, and everybody knows that. And when I speak around the country, I look at people just looking down at their feet, and they're saying, oh, man, we can't win.
Exactly.
I refuse to believe that, and we can win. First of all, they are being revealed like never before. They have hidden in the background for so long, and all of a sudden, like my example of the Southern Poverty Law Center, that finally even the big boys are starting to get exposed, and that is helping. We do have more people who are beginning to wake up to this, and I am getting more phone calls from elected officials on the property rights issues, the Agenda 21 issues, saying, what do we do? How do we stop this? I never got those before. We're getting them now. I just addressed a city council and a mayor over the phone in Kansas the other day, and I gave a 45-minute presentation on everything we're talking about. Not everything, but a lot of what we're talking about.
A lot of it, yeah.
And I got a great response, very positive. I said, watch out for the grants.
Yeah.
That resonated with them. They got that. And so we're starting to get these things happening. We're starting to win some victories, things I didn't think we could. And so I keep saying I'm the Pollyanna of this movement, but number one is one of the biggest problems with our movement is that we had everything, and we know how it should be, and we want it all back. We want it now. And we're not willing to take little victories as a victory. We think, well, we didn't win. We got that, but we didn't win. And we didn't lose it in one big fight. We've lost it in 1,000 cuts, and we're going to get it back that way. But I see it starting to happen, and I'm very optimistic about it, and we can win this. We just have to speak out. We have to organize. We have to win. I mean, we have to communicate with each other and understand what the problem is. Right,
and most of the action is on the local level, right, where people live?
Yeah. I talk about this. A lot of people just really, they don't get involved in politics except in presidential elections. They get all excited about that. Maybe a congressman or whatever. The fact of the matter is, our founders were genius in how they put together our system, that the local level was to have the most impact on you. And it's still true. And the other side knows that. That's what they've used. They've used the local level. This is still where we can fight the battles. And if you can, and it's so vast. I mean, look, we've talked for 2 hours on all these different things. It is so vast. Where do you focus? Because people start down one road and they get diverted and they end up, and then they finally give up because they don't know where to go.
Yeah.
That's why I have focused on property rights. If we can present or preserve property rights and defend them, they can't implement most of these other things. And that's the place to start. True. Lay that platform, and then we can begin to push on the other things.
So if you're working locally, like in a town or city or a county where you live, and you just want to make things better locally there, one of the questions that comes up sometimes is that the way that the legal system has organized the states with respect to the counties and cities is that the state, which is a corporation, an incorporated company, basically, down, if you take it down to the basics, is it still true that the county and the city and the town are subdivisions of the state corporation, or are they independent?
Well, they're operating like they're subdivisions, like they can't break away.
They tend to say that, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but what we're seeing happen, and this is one of the most dangerous things, is these regional councils that are being implemented, where they are 10 and 15 counties, and the people on top of those are not elected to those positions; they're appointed, and they'll argue, well, we have city councilmen and mayors and so on. Yeah, you do, but they weren't elected to be on that, and
they give away their authority to the regional board, right?
Yeah, absolutely, they do, and it's the regional boards a lot of the times that are applying for the grants that now affect that huge area instead of just your community. There's a HUD program, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, which actually puts a community in a regional plan. It meant sometimes the community doesn't even know they're in it until it's too late.
So it sounds like they have to withdraw from these groups officially, don't they, in some way?
Yeah. And they can. They can. I've talked to some communities that did, And they're taking all kinds of pressure because they did it, but they have done it. It can be done. And this is what I was arguing to these city councilmen, that first of all, these organizations, I already said the non-governmental organizations are private organizations. They're not government organizations. But you also get groups like the National Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, people like this. These are all 501c3 private organizations. They are not government entities, and the only reason that they have any influence or power over your local city council is because the city councilmen give it to them. If you get city councilmen that won't do that, then you can tell them, go pound sand, get out of here.
It's just like in the horror movies where the rule is everybody knows who watches. I don't watch horror movies anymore, but a long time ago I've seen some, and except for what they call real life, of course. But in the horror movies, everybody knows that you have to invite the vampire into your house, or there's some, I don't know if they belong to a council of vampires or whatever, but they have this agreement that they can't come in and bite you unless you invite them in. And so the vampires in this case are in two forms. One is the grants that let these big organizations into your local community, and the other is membership in a regional council. And if you've already invited that vampire in, what would matter, which a lot of these guys have, the procedures to get out would be important, right?
Yeah. That's a very good analogy.
I think it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think you're right. And here's another thing that I teach people when I'm speaking is, you elect your city council, your county commission, and why do these people run for office? Well, 90% of the time, they're good people. They're just people in the community that want to be involved and do something.
Yeah.
There are evil people who know exactly what they're doing. That's why they ran. But in most cases, they're just neighbors. They're just good people. And what happens as soon as we put them in office? The first thing we do is send them off to the meeting of the National League of Cities or the county for county commissioners.
Well, I don't think most people know that they're sending them off anywhere. That's just happening, right?
Yeah. Well, the point of it is the city's a member of these organizations.
Okay.
And so we're having the meeting, and they go to the meetings, and of course they're talking to other communities. And this is what we did. We put this program in place, whatever. But speaking from the podium are these NGO groups that have all these plans.
Okay.
There's a program called What Works Cities. There's another one, Form-Based Codes. These things all are these programs that are jiving all this together, and they'll give them sample legislation. They come home, they're met by the same representatives of the same groups. Did you get the sample legislation? Hey, we got the grant for you. Here, we got all this, and they eventually. And
we don't have to think anymore because the bigger organization makes all the decisions.
This is what's working everywhere. Yeah. And
this is a microcosm of what happens to countries when they join things like the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, all these other things. This is happening, as you're describing, at your local level.
Exactly. They begin to believe, well, this is a proper role of government. Now, somebody like me comes in and says, whoa, and these guys are whispering in their ear, this guy's nuts, don't pay attention to him. Yeah, we know. Agenda 21, what's that? Never heard of it. This isn't that. This is all local.
Yeah.
That's what we get all the time.
Conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you need local representatives that will basically quit their memberships in all these organizations. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They'll blow away. They have no right to be there except your local officials bring them in and give them that power.
They're the vampire and invited in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So you need. I've often wondered, how do the people seem so good at the local level when they're running for office, and you can actually talk to them? They seem like humans and everything, and then in most cases, once they've been in office for a while, they become terrible, and they're implementing all these bad things. And I think you're explaining part of that.
Yeah, exactly. That's really what happens. They're molded, and of course they'll see these NGOs and stuff. They'll see them coming. Here's a good guy that we can get a hold of, And as I tell audiences, So you have 5 members of your county commission, for example.
Right.
There's one of them. There's one of them who's the leader in this stuff. He's the one driving them. He's the one pushing to get these grants and so forth. And if you want to really get the other ones to back off of this, focus on that guy. And if you could put a campaign together to get him out of office, I guarantee you the other 4 would go, whoa. And this is what victory looks like. Victory is when your city councilman or county commissioners are sitting there and the NGOs come in and say, hey, I got the next plan for you. I got the money for you, too. And you start to see a little sweat come down the county commissioner's face, and he says, do you know what my people would do to me if we did this? That's what victory looks like, and that's where we have to get them.
And you've been seeing some of that happen, right?
I have, yes. Yeah. And when I speak, I teach this as I go around. I do a whole audience participation thing where I bring people up and show them all these representatives of these different things, and they act out the parts and so forth, and then they can see what it really looks like.
Wow, incredible. So to kind of wrap up, why don't we just summarize what your main thrust is right now and how people can stay in touch with it and support it and follow along?
Yeah. Our main thrust, as I said, is taking this massive thing and bring it down to where the average guy can put his head around it and understand what it is. That's why I focused on property rights. If you can protect property rights, you can protect your freedom, and that can move up. Politicians have a means of watching trends, what's happening, and if they start to see this beginning to happen, next thing you know, a legislator will pick it up and start in the state legislature. So eventually, maybe a congressman. We can do it that way, but focus on the local level. And we've on our website at AmericanPolicy.org, we have all kinds of tools that we've created for this. We've got a resolution for the protection of citizens' property rights. We've got a booklet called Agenda 21 and how to stop it. And it talks about how to use that resolution and some of the things I'm talking about here. And so we've created these tools. Of course, my new book, Sustainable, The War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals, I wrote it as a handbook for activists to use, to have all the background. I go through who the NGOs are, how they operate, all the history of it, and then the different policies that are, in place. I broke it down between rural and city, and what to do about it. So,
and that's all in the book, Sustainable?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Where do they buy that?
They can get it at our website at AmericanPolicy.org. So
okay.
You can get it on Amazon. There's a Kindle version of it on Amazon.
Yeah, if you wanted to erase, that's a good place to get it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. But Amazon is such a thieving operation that I hardly get anything out of that. So I always want people to go to my website and get it. But
yeah, that's a good idea.
But you can get it there. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's great. And as this expands, I think it would be good to stay in touch and get updates from you if you get time to come back and talk again.
Absolutely. Sure.
That would be great. And hopefully we can get this discussion out because you've covered so much. If we can share it and use it as a teaching tool, I think that would be great too.
Yes. Anything we can do like that to help people understand, that's what's key.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds great. Well, hold on and we'll say goodbye in the break here and talk to you after that.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys, there goes Tom DeWeese from American Policy Center, the president and founder of it. And I consider the work that he's doing to educate about Agenda 21 and how to get free from it before it accomplishes all its goals to be very valuable education. And I'm grateful that he's been willing to come on Lost Arts Radio several times with us. And this time we covered a lot of important updated information, including Green New Deal related stuff. And he's apparently working on a tool right now for people to work locally, which I think is really important. Even though none of us have time for it, we've got to find some time to start at least being aware of what's being done in our own local communities by local government that's going to impact our lives. Because if we don't pay attention to it, we're going to pay attention later when it's more difficult to work with. And he's got a tool that sounds really powerful about protecting property rights, and it's using the Civil Rights Act, Section 1983, some of you may have heard of, that makes the local officials personally responsible and liable for what they do to you if you're living in the community there by the laws and policies that they pass. So that's going to be exciting, and we'll be aware of it when it comes out and it's ready for use. And in the meantime, you can keep up with Tom's work at americanpolicy.org. Really informative website. I would recommend getting on his email list because he's putting out really important information multiple times a week. He also wrote a novel called Erased, which I found really good, and you might want to take a look at that at some point, and another one called Sustainable, which I haven't read yet, but sounds like it's got a lot of practical tools for trying to keep things healthy and sane in your own local community. So I think Tom is a really important ally in the work that he's doing. He's starting to have success in places not just all over America, but outside the country as well, because of the point that he brought up that everybody's rights actually are the same, whether the government of their country or county or city recognizes it or not. So we've got work to do. Now, to make that more effective, what I found is that the attitude that you go into that with is really critical. And how you personally feel, what your energy level is, normally not with drugs, but just everyday normal energy level and health level, and trying to stay not addicted to multiple medical toxic chemicals called medicine. Those things really affect the impact of what you can be able to do on the outer level. So that's why we started a private group called Planetary Healing Club to get yourself taken care of first. And there's a lot of forbidden information on health that you are no longer allowed to talk about publicly without serious ramifications, not just on injecting chemicals into people, but a lot of other stuff, because the reality is that 98% of the so-called health system is really not just irrelevant, but harmful now. And so we had to start a private platform where we would talk about how to use the real information and get your energy and well-being back without a bunch of drugs and other things. So check, if you're into that and you're brave enough to look at it and see how to change some of the things that you're currently thinking you have to do, look at planetaryhealingclub.com, and we'll also go into some much deeper consciousness tools that will make you much more effective in using some of the things that Tom talks about. Because there's a weird thing that I've observed, and that's that people working for great causes and even talking about wonderful things like what Tom is suggesting we get involved in, if they're carrying around a lot of deep internal anger and resentment and frustration, and they really just want to fight and prove the other guys are all wrong and that they're good and the other people are bad, they're going to leave a residue of their presentation where everybody just still wants to fight, and they're not going to get the cooperation that would really make it much better. And so what I found is that aspects of consciousness can be changed if we're brave enough to do that, so that when you do stand up in your city council or county or state or whatever, that the impact that you're going to have is a lot better, and you're going to appeal to people who thought they were against you, and they'll end up thinking, wait a minute, this person's thinking about common interests that we really are all on the same side for. And we're starting a new series of shows, I think, where this is going to be a theme, that all the major issues, really none of them are partisan at all. That's the truth. And that they're either in favor of the well-being of humanity and the biosphere that we're part of, or not. And if we change the attitude toward that, the potential effectiveness dealing with government issues and things that Tom's talking about is radically increased. So if that's of use to you, if you're interested, check out planetaryhealingclub.com and find out what we're trying to do. Other than that, we'll be on all these major platforms as long as we can, YouTube and Facebook and all the other ones that we're on. Find our free videos there that are put out as often as we can, at least every week, and hopefully more. And for major center of developments of everything and seeing where we're on the air and what we're planning to do and what the projects are, look at lostartsradio.com. That's the center of our operation, and really appreciate your taking the time to listen and join us for these things. Most of them are on video. Tom was only able to come on by telephone. That's why we weren't video today. And We've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up, so stay in touch. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time.
Introducing Lost Arts Radio Live, our new Saturday late afternoon, early evening 1-hour live stream show. This new show precedes our Planetary Healing Club, which starts at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific. The Planetary Healing Club, which is not free and open to the public, but you can join for a minimum donation of just $10 a month. Our new live stream show, which is free, starts Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and 4:30 Pacific. It can be accessed by going to lostartsradio.com/live. You can tune into our live stream from our Facebook page at facebook.com/lostartsradio, from our YouTube channel at youtube.com/lostartsradio, as well as both Periscope and Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. You can ask questions during the show by using the chat function on YouTube or make a comment on Facebook during the live stream. Once again, that's Lost Arts Radio Live, Saturdays at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. As of January 2018, the Saturday live call-in show is now an interactive video platform called the Planetary Healing Club. The cost is just a $10 minimum monthly donation, automatically billed through your PayPal account. Sign up at lostartsradio.com/club. The Planetary Healing Club is every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. You get your link to participate in the show upon signing up as a member. Those shows are also archived as well for club members. Listen to our new shows with guests every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. All Sunday shows with guests have archives freely available on our website at lostartsradio.com. You can also find them at blogtalkradio.com/lostartsradio, as well as our YouTube channel, youtube.com/C/lostartsradio. Mixcloud at mixcloud.com/lostartsradio. And finally, look us up under the podcast directory on iTunes. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/lostartsradio or on Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. Be sure to join the free Lost Arts Radio Facebook group as well. Just search for Lost Arts Radio Group within Facebook. You can also join our forum on our website if you want to interact with other listeners. We also have links to all of the great independent musicians whose music we feature each week on Lost Arts Radio. When you do your Amazon shopping, please use Amazon's Smile program at smile.amazon.com. And when you choose Lost Arts Research Institute in Sedona, Arizona as your charity, Amazon will donate 0.5% of whatever your order total is to Lost Arts Research Institute to help fund the building of the school and keep our radio show on the air. Please visit lostartsresearchinstitute.org for more information on the school we want to build. Be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter on our site under the Radio Show tab or right from the button on our Facebook page. Contact Richard at richard@lostartsradio.com or myself, Doug Diamond, at doug@lostartsradio.com. Thanks again for listening to Lost Arts Radio, and we'll see you again next week.
Every time I see you, baby, you seem quiet as a mouse. You ain't talked to me nice since I lost my job, my car, and my house. Every week I see you, I'm wishing you would still be mine. And it doesn't help a bit, baby, that you're the clerk giving me my check in the welfare line. When I'm down and out, you see me, I look like a worthless bum. But when I get it together, baby, you won't see me 'cause I won't have to come. Oh, I pray for the day I won't need your check no more. But then I guess you won't be much impressed with me if I ain't even walking in the door. Try to borrow my buddy's car, maybe he'll loan me his suit. I'll be able to take you out, baby, just as soon as you give me my loot. It's a shame, 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 I got to crawl for you this way. But damn, if I don't have to crawl, I guess that means you don't have to give me my pay. You don't have to tell me you love me. It's not like a major decision. Just look at it like a kickback, baby, a benefit of your position. I can't put you and two other guys on the moon. I ain't got no spaceship, baby, but on Friday I can get you a steak, a drink, and a room.